Some ghosts don't haunt you. They wait. 10 years. That's how long it took me to come back. Not to make peace. Not to settle a score. I wasn't here to scream or throw chairs or punch the past in the face. That's not how real revenge works. Real revenge is quiet. Real revenge walks in through the front doors in a tailored suit, smiles at the receptionist, signs the guest book, and sits down in the front row like it belongs. Because it does now. The school hadn't changed much. Same brick walls, same fountain out front with the chipstone angel. The paint looked a little newer, the banners a little flashier, but the bones were the same. Old buildings don't forget, they just get better at hiding things. My name wasn't on any list when I first walked through those doors a decade ago. Back then, I was just Caleb Thompson, 17, skinny, poor, always second-guessing every sentence out of my mouth. The kind of kid no one listens to until it's too late. Now they called me Mr. Mercer, CEO, tech innovator, one of the youngest alumni to ever pledge a six-figure donation to the school. They didn't know who I really was. Not yet. That was the point. The charity gala was in full swing when I arrived. Glittering lights, folding chairs wrapped in ribbon, champagne flutes clinking against forced laughter. The stage was lit soft gold. A podium stood tall at the center. Behind it, a projector looped images of distinguished graduates, as if this place had ever cared about anything but reputation. I scanned the crowd. There she was, Mrs. Pritchard, still wearing that brittle smile, like her face had been laminated in discipline. The same woman who had looked me in the eyes and said, "We're disappointed in you, Caleb, but not surprised." Next to her stood Headmaster Ellis, sipping wine with a smug grace. I remembered how he barely looked up when signing my expulsion papers. Didn't even ask if I had a lawyer. Now, they were clapping for donors they didn't recognize, thanking ghosts they didn't realize they'd created. And tonight, one of those ghosts was sitting in their front row. I crossed my legs, smiled politely, waited. There's something satisfying about seeing the people who broke you grow old. Not bitter, just aware. You see the lines on their faces. You hear how their voices crack when they try to sound important. Time erodes more than stone it erodes illusion. And under all that polish, they were just people. Flawed, cowardly, small. They never saw me coming. Because they never looked back. People like that don't believe in consequences. They believe in control, in reputation, in silence. That's what they count on. And that's why my silence scared them more than anything else. The MC tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said brightly, "please welcome one of our most generous new patrons, Mr. Caleb Mercer, founder and CEO of Argent Systems. Tonight, he's pledged $250,000 to our future science and ethics programs." The word ethics almost made me laugh. Applause broke out. Chairs shifted. I stood, walked to the stage, took the mic, paused. I looked at Mrs. Pritchard. She smiled, confused. I looked at Ellis. His brow twitched. Then I looked out across the crowd and said, 10 years ago, I was expelled from this school for something I didn't do. No trial, no evidence, just a broken watch and a rush to protect a legacy. The silence cracked through the room like thunder. My name was Caleb Thompson back then. I doubt many of you remember that name, but I do. Every single day. A few gasps. A wine glass tilted. I was 17, accused of theft, labeled a liar, and dismissed in front of my peers without so much as a second thought. Because I didn't come from the right family. Because I didn't wear the right shoes. Because it was easier to believe I was the problem. I turned to look at Ellis. His face had gone pale. "I'm not here to ask for an apology or to collect any debt. I don't need either. I came back for something else." I leaned slightly forward to remind you that ghosts don't always stay buried, and that sometimes they return not to haunt but to rebuild what you tried to destroy. Silence. I handed the mic back, walked off the stage. Not one person clapped, and that was perfect. I remember that morning like it never left me. Gray October skies, misty rain tapping against the windows. I was standing in the back hallway near the library where no one really went during break when the loudspeaker crackled to life. Caleb Thompson, report to the office. No one wished me luck. No one looked at me. They just walked past like I'd already disappeared. I stepped into the principal's office. Mrs. Pritchard was there. So was Headmaster Ellis. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that made my skin tighten. A silver watch lay on the table between them. Scratched face, torn leather strap. I'd never seen it before, but their eyes told me everything. In their minds, I was already guilty. Do you know whose this is? Mrs. Pritchard asked, resting her chin on her hand. No, ma'am, I said. They didn't nod, didn't write anything down, just exchanged glances. Its owner reported it missing yesterday, and you were the last one in the classroom. I only stayed behind to ask about the assignment. Miss Hannah can confirm. Miss Hannah didn't see you leave, and no one else came in after. I repeated, I didn't take it. They didn't need proof. They needed a name to close the file, and I was the easiest one. No wealthy parents, no lawyer on call, just a scholarship kid from a single mother home. The kind they could erase without consequences. Caleb, Mr. Ellis said, his voice slick as oil, this school has a reputation to maintain. If you quietly withdraw, we can handle this internally. I understood exactly what that meant. Leave and don't make noise. I stared at him in silence. My jaw clenched until it bled. I wasn't afraid I was paralyzed. Not by guilt, but by the realization that I could scream the truth and it still wouldn't matter. I was suspended that day, expelled 2 days later. No investigation, no defense. My mother called. She begged until her voice cracked, but they didn't listen. They just wanted to bury the mess and smile for the cameras. 3 weeks later, I saw the photos from their Excellence Awards ceremony on the school's Facebook page. The same kids who laughed behind my back stood on stage, ties straight, teeth gleaming, and I was sitting on a park bench with a suitcase full of books no longer worth anything and a rejection letter from the one college I had dreamed of. Character concerns, they said. Every door slammed shut. I thought about dying. Not because I was weak, because I had nowhere to go, no one to call. Everyone I had trusted, teachers, classmates, mentors, turned away like I'd never existed. But I didn't die. I lived because I wanted them to remember. Not with apologies, with silence sharp enough to cut. I left it all behind. My mother and I moved to a small town. I took a job at a dusty computer shop, cleaning smudged monitors and fixing cheap malware for tired old customers. At night, I studied. Online courses, used books, obsolete programming manuals from the public library. I had no friends. Needed none. Only time. In the belief that someday I would return not to ask why, but to look them in the eyes and say, I'm still here. And I remember exactly what you did. People assume revenge starts with rage. It doesn't. It starts with silence, with building yourself out of nothing while everyone forgets your name. I spent years in that silence, coding in the back room of a repair shop, fixing overheating laptops, broken USB ports, password resets for people who'd forgotten how to click save. I said thank you, more than I said my own name. Every night I studied data structures, cryptography, behavioral modeling. The pieces were random at first, but over time they clicked into shape. I wasn't just learning to build things. I was learning how to dismantle them. By 21, I had a freelance profile and a stack of silent clients. I didn't advertise, didn't network. I delivered results quietly, effectively, and always on time. That made people trust me. And the more they trusted me, the more they told me things they shouldn't. I started collecting patterns. Not names, patterns. How money moved. How secrets hid in plain sight. How small missteps, accidental ones, could shift power from one party to another without anyone noticing. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not yet. I was building the architecture for it. At 23, I launched my own cybersecurity platform. Basic at first, just a sandbox environment for small companies to test vulnerabilities. But it worked. It was fast. It was cheap. And above all, it didn't break. A seed fund from a low-profile investor in Singapore gave it legs. A quiet article in a trade blog caught someone's attention at a data conference in Berlin. Then came the interviews. I said no to most, but one stood out. Argent Systems, my company, was invited to pitch at an alumni innovation summit at St. Augustine Academy, the same school that expelled me. I declined the first request. I accepted the second. Returning as a guest speaker wasn't about ego. It was about access. I walked back through those gates with a polished smile, a custom-cut navy suit, and a new name, Caleb Mercer. The surname was my grandmother's. The demeanor was all mine. The reception desk didn't blink. Of course, Mr. Mercer, we're honored. The headmaster would love to meet you before your segment. I bet he would. I walked the halls before the speech. Some of the classrooms had new smart boards. Some of the teachers were new too. But the bones were unchanged. The plaques on the walls still gleamed with names, donors, scholars, founders. My name wasn't there. Not yet. Mrs. Pritchard passed me in the hallway. Didn't recognize me. I watched her scold a freshman over a dress code violation, her voice still brittle, her tone still surgical. I kept walking. The gala would come later. The big stage, the press, but this moment, the quiet walk, the unnoticed presence, this was the prelude, the shadow before the lightning. When the school emailed me later asking if I considered becoming a founding sponsor for their new digital ethics program, I said yes. With conditions. I asked to remain anonymous. I wanted full access to financial transparency records. And I wanted to meet the student committee, the next generation of future leaders. They agreed. Of course they did. When someone offers you $250,000, you don't ask questions. You smile, shake hands, and sell them the keys to the house. Over the next 6 months, I made regular appearances. Not flashy ones. Small donations, quiet visits, one-on-one conversations with staff. I built trust, brick by brick. I sat on curriculum review panels. I suggested guest speakers. I connected them with industry contacts, people I knew, people who owed me favors, or people who simply liked the idea of working with a clean brand. Argent Systems was clean. Too clean. Because every good illusion is. It took time, but eventually, I was invited to sit in on board meetings. I accepted. That's when I saw it, the rot under the foundation. Funds misused. Students from the right families getting quiet waivers for failing grades. One staff member quietly reassigned after an incident never formally logged. And at the center of it all, Ellis, smiling in every photo, polished in every speech. A snake in a suit. He had leveraged the school into a personal kingdom of favors and cover-ups. He still didn't recognize me. That was the most satisfying part. Because the clock was ticking now, not for me, for him. Revenge doesn't start with an explosion. It starts with access. By the time they handed me the donor logins to the internal board portal, I already knew the names that mattered, knew who signed what, who approved what, and who looked the other way. I didn't need passwords. I needed patterns. And patterns were my specialty. I didn't leak anything. Not yet. Leaking is messy, emotional. A single headline, a splash of outrage, and then the news cycle moves on. Number, I didn't want noise. I wanted erosion. I wanted the floor beneath them to rot 1 quiet inch at a time. So I started with pressure points, small grants, obscure policy tweaks. I suggested vendors I trusted because they were mine. I created third-party audits for donor transparency, all routed through a shell firm I'd established years ago. On paper, it looked clean, efficient, reform-driven. Behind the scenes, I was redrawing their maps. Ellis liked control. That's how I broke him. I gave him too much of it. At a board dinner, I made a casual comment about expanding into online learning partnerships. Ellis jumped on it, wanted to lead the project, present it as his vision for the future. I feigned hesitation, then gave my support. We set up a pilot program with another shell company I owned, staffed it with contractors loyal to me. Everything funneled data to a private server I controlled. Why? Because schools like St. Augustine live off image. An image is a house of glass. I didn't want to destroy it. I wanted to let them do it with their own hands. Mrs. Pritchard was trickier. She never trusted easily. But she did trust ambition. I introduced her to a venture-backed edtech platform again, mine framed as a women-led initiative for underrepresented educators. I gave her the title of Executive Advisor. It came with a modest stipend and the illusion of power. She loved it. In 2 months, she was emailing me curriculum suggestions. In 4, she was bad-mouthing other board members to me behind closed doors. By 6, she had forwarded internal student records to support her analysis of academic trends, which of course violated federal privacy laws. I saved everything. There's something deeply poetic about watching the same people who once crushed you now trust you to guide them. Because I didn't raise my voice, I didn't drop a threat. I simply nodded, listened, and nudged. Each time they blinked, I took another step forward. When they looked again, I was already behind them. By now, my face was everywhere. Press releases, fundraising brochures, tech conference panels. I was the quiet visionary giving back. Ellis introduced me once as one of our proudest alumni. I almost laughed, but I didn't, because I needed one more piece. Not the school, him. I started feeding him recognition, whispered to the PR team that Ellis was due for an education award, drafted the nomination myself under a pseudonym, paid a boutique PR firm to spread buzz. And when he won, he stood on stage, dripping with gratitude, thanking me by name. I clapped. So did everyone else. He had no idea the walls were already cracking. The tipping point came from inside. A sophomore named Alexis Chu sent an anonymous complaint to a staff member about test score manipulation. Her GPA had mysteriously dropped after contesting a grade given by one of Ellis's preferred instructors. I saw the email because I'd built the system it was routed through, and I made sure it got lost in the digital ether for 3 weeks. Why? Because when it resurfaced, I wanted it to look like a cover-up, and it did. That was when I sent the files, all of them. Financial inconsistencies, altered records, internal emails, Pritchard's data breach, Ellis's scheme with ghost faculty appointments. I didn't send them to the press. I sent them to the school's own legal counsel. With a polite note, I believe these issues may warrant internal review. As a donor, I would like to believe in the integrity of the institution I support. No signature, just a clean burner email. And within 72 hours, the entire board was in emergency session. Ellis was suspended. Pritchard resigned for personal reasons. The school entered a formal investigation. And me? I gave another donation, quietly. No one asked questions, because they couldn't afford to. Not now. They were too busy trying to stop the bleeding, and I was the only one holding the tourniquet. They say revenge is best served cold, but I didn't want cold. I wanted clinical. I wanted to dissect the moment in full view, not out of rage, but with precision, not in the shadows. On stage, the school's Centennial Gala was scheduled for late April, a glittering event to honor 100 years of academic excellence. Red carpet, press, coverage, alumni from every generation. And me, the keynote donor, the success story, the boy who made it. They still didn't know. Not really. Ellis had been suspended, pending review, but the board hadn't disclosed details. Rumors swirled mismanagement, impropriety, a paperwork mix-up. I stayed silent. Until now. I stood behind the curtain, watching the final video montage fade to black. Scenes of smiling students, faculty portraits, generations of handshakes and trophies. All lies. My name was next on the program. I walked onto the stage. The applause came slow, then spread. People clapped because they were told to, because the pamphlet said I was generous, because the suit fit and the lighting was good. I smiled. Then I started speaking. I'm honored to be here tonight. I'm grateful to this institution, but not in the way you might expect. A pause. A ripple of polite laughter. I was a student here once. You won't find my name in the records. I was erased, efficiently, quietly. The room began to still. You see, when I was 16, I was accused of stealing a watch. No evidence, no defense, just a closed door and an expulsion letter. Some faces stiffened. Some squinted. The board chair shifted uncomfortably. My mother begged. I said nothing. I remember standing outside that gate as the rain came down, knowing I'd been discarded like trash. I watched the audience stop breathing. I was Caleb Thompson. Gasps now. Real ones. And I am here, not for revenge, not for validation, but to tell you the story you tried to bury. Silence. For 10 years, I rebuilt my life. I worked menial jobs. I studied in libraries while your students took private tutoring. And then I built something clean, something real. I looked at the row of faculty in the front. Some had gone pale. Some were whispering. And when you asked me to give back, I said yes. A pause. But not because I believed in you. I stepped away from the podium because I believed in memory. I pulled out a small remote. Behind me, the screen came alive. Emails, scans, signatures, documents bearing Ellis's name. Records altered under Pritchard's credentials. I didn't narrate. I let the truth speak. Let the audience see the architecture of their own hypocrisy. Let the school's proudest night turn into a confession booth. When the last image faded, I returned to the microphone. You taught me something valuable. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. The first time. Then, I stepped down. No one clapped. Not a soul. Just the echoes of their own shame ringing through a ballroom built on tradition. Afterward, a few people tried to find me. A reporter. A former classmate. Even the interim headmaster. I didn't answer. I was already gone. I walked out the side door into the cool night, stripped off the name tag, and dropped it in a trash can outside the catering truck. It said, Mr. Mercer, visionary benefactor. What a joke. I didn't go online for 2 days. When I finally checked, the videos were everywhere. Some guest had recorded the entire speech. It had gone viral, TikTok edits, Twitter threads, a Medium article titled, The Man Who Undid a Century in 10 Minutes. News outlets were calling it a reckoning. The school issued a public statement. Pritchard resigned formally. Ellis disappeared. An investigation was launched, but I wasn't watching for outcomes. I already had mine. I sat alone on the balcony of a cheap rental cabin, overlooking a lake that didn't care about my past. And I smiled, for the first time in a decade. Not because I'd won, but because I'd remember who I was and made sure they did, too. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was surgical. 3 days after the gala, the Board of Trustees held a press conference. They didn't mention my name. They didn't have to. Words like integrity, internal review, and regret floated across the podium like stale perfume. They promised reforms, promised transparency, promised they were listening. All the usual rot. I didn't watch it live. I was sitting in a second-floor cafe in Lisbon, phone off, watching pigeons fight over bread on a cobbled street. Because I hadn't done this for applause, I did it for precision. Ellis vanished from the public eye, resigned quietly from every board he sat on. His LinkedIn went dark. So did his family's accounts. He'd been too careful for criminal charges, too smart to leave a trail with blood on it. But reputation was all he had. And now, even that was gone. Pritchard was different. She tried to fight, filed a lawsuit against the school for wrongful termination, claimed she was set up. Her lawyer gave interviews. She went on one podcast, just one. It didn't help, because I'd already sent everything to the Education Accreditation Board. Not the press. Not the public. The people who actually mattered. When they suspended her teaching license pending review, she released a statement. I have decided to step away from public life. That was her last headline. The school rebranded. New slogan. New headmaster. New mission statement. They called it a fresh start. But you can't scrub history. Not really. Not when the truth lives on in 100 videos, screenshots, articles. Not when students whisper the name Caleb Thompson in the same breath as scandal. They try to paint me as a concerned alumnus. A cautionary tale. Fine. They could call it whatever made them sleep better. But they'd never forget. And that's what mattered. My company tripled in valuation the following year. Investors cited inspiring leadership. One publication called me a model of resilience. They didn't know half of it. And I didn't tell them. Because some victories don't belong on resumes. Some victories aren't for the world. They're for you and the boy you used to be. I bought my mother a house. Not a mansion. Not a trophy. Just a quiet place with a garden and a porch where she could drink tea and forget how close we came to losing everything. She cried the day I handed her the keys. Didn't say thank you. Just whispered, I never stopped believing you. That was enough. Sometimes, people ask if I'd ever return to the school. Give a real talk. Accept the honorary degree they later offered in a private letter unsigned, of course. I didn't respond. Because I'd already spoken. I'd already left my mark. And I had no interest in polishing the ruins I helped collapse. Instead, I focused forward. Built new platforms. Mentored young engineers. Funded anonymous scholarships for kids who couldn't afford second chances. And each time I signed a check or opened a door for someone, I thought of the boy sitting in a rain-soaked uniform on the edge of a curb. I didn't just survive him. I made sure he would never be erased again. Victory isn't loud. It doesn't shout from rooftops or demand credit. Real victory is quiet, clean, absolute. It's when you can walk past the place that broke you and feel nothing. No rage, no pain, just a stillness. Because you know, deep in your bones, you won. I went back once. Not to make a point, not for closure, just curiosity. It was a weekday afternoon in late fall. Classes were in session. The courtyard was empty, save for a janitor sweeping leaves near the chapel steps. I parked across the street. Didn't walk in. Didn't need to. From that distance, the school looked smaller. The brick walls, once towering, now just structures. The banners, faded. The fountain, still cracked near the base, the same fracture I used to trace with my shoe when waiting for my mother to pick me up. Nothing had changed. Except me. I thought I'd feel something. Triumph. Nostalgia. Maybe a flicker of bitterness. But there was just quiet. Like standing over a battlefield long after the war ended. The bodies buried. The smoke cleared. Only the wind left, blowing through ghosts no one remembered but you. I smiled. Not out of happiness. Out of recognition. The kind of smile you give when you finally understand why the pain was necessary. Some scars stay invisible. People assume if you look successful, you've moved on. But I didn't move on. I moved through the silence, through the accusations, through the years no one apologized for. That's the part no one sees. They see the suit, the clean lines, the company. They don't see the 16-year-old boy who sat on a bench clutching a rejection letter with shaking hands. They don't see the night spent rewriting the same line of code 100 times just to get it right. They don't see the price of surviving when no one wants you to win. But I do. I see him every time I look in the mirror, and I nod, because he didn't break. I don't believe in revenge the way I used to. It's not about destruction. It's about displacement, about removing the rot and replacing it with something cleaner, sharper, smarter, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to reclaim what was taken, even if it's just the truth. People ask why I never named names in public, why I never stood in front of a camera and called them out one by one. Because it wasn't about them. It was about the system that protected them. The silence that made their cruelty ordinary, the machine that needed someone to blame and picked the quietest boy in the room. I didn't burn it down. I unplugged it. Then I walked away. Years later, I received a letter, typed, formal, from a student I'd never met. She said she'd been accused of cheating on a math test, said she was ready to give up until she read about me, until she realized that what they take from you doesn't define who you become. She said, "You reminded me that truth isn't something they give back. It's something you carry until you can finally speak it." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, because I understood. Her story didn't need me anymore. And that was the point. I live quietly now. No penthouse, no spotlight, just a workspace with too many monitors and a back porch where I drink black coffee at sunrise. Sometimes the wind carries the sound of a school bell from miles away. It used to haunt me. Now it just reminds me how far I've walked and how deeply I refuse to go back. The longest checkmate wasn't about revenge. It was about endurance, about becoming the kind of man who didn't need to prove anything because the truth already did. And if they remember me, let it be this: the boy you erased came back smarter, and he made sure the silence never swallowed another name again.